There's no bad idea that doesn't ultimately prevail in Washington. Case in point, the US planned to turn over to Ukraine some $300 billion in frozen Russian assets. The assets consist of foreign exchange reserve that the US and the EU had seized following the start of Russia's so-called special military operation. With the US unable to win congressional approval for another $60 billion for Ukraine, and with the EU unable to overcome the resistance of Hungary to an additional €50 billion, there's only one remedy left. If you can't appropriate the money legally, then just steal it. There is a problem though. Most of the frozen $300 billion is in Europe. Only about $5 billion is in the US, and the Europeans worry that if one state's money is turned over to another state, no one would want to keep his money in the EU ever again. The Europeans also worry that Moscow could retaliate by confiscating funds that are blocked in Russia. Hence the brilliant US idea: get Congress to pass a law making theft of Russian sovereign assets legal, and use the law to press the Europeans to go along with the plan. The US bill, the so-called Rebuilding Economic Prosperity and Opportunity for Ukrainians Act, enjoys bipartisan support. It has 14 sponsors in the Senate, 62 in the House. Republican Speaker Mike Johnson has said, quote, "It would be pure poetry to fund the Ukrainian war effort with Russian assets." In other words, use Russia's money to finance the killing of Russians. The UK too is on board. Foreign Secretary Lord David Cameron has said the UK might act with the US if the EU doesn't go along. Extraordinary times require extraordinary measures, he said recently. In the face of US pressure, the EU came up with a watered-down alternative. It wouldn't turn over to Ukraine Russia's central bank reserves, but it would slap a whopping windfall tax on any interest earned. The EU would then hand over this windfall tax to Ukraine. It's still theft, of course, but not quite as blatant as the one envisaged by the Americans. US law, of course, has no binding power on the EU, but the US has every expectation that the EU will go along with the plan. The US and the EU have long made it a habit to freeze foreign currency reserves of states deemed to be adversaries. Iran, Syria, Venezuela, and Afghanistan have all had their central bank assets frozen. What the US wants to do now, though, is unprecedented. No one had ever turned over one state's sovereign assets to another state. Not even during World War II did the Allied powers help themselves to Nazi Germany's foreign currency reserves. No international body, not the UN, not the World Court, would ever sign off on anything so flagrantly illegal. The US is currently attacking the Houthis of Yemen, claiming that they're interfering with freedom of navigation and peaceful commerce. However, a state that's prepared to steal the foreign currency reserves of another state probably isn't serious about peaceful commerce.